Morning. Morning, David. Morning, Barbara. You notice I'm a wee bit early. I'm a couple of minutes early. It's because I'm doing it through Zoom and getting it out on Facebook because apparently my phone mic isn't up too much. But I know that my webcam is much better. So it's a wee bit confusing for me because there's a bit of lag on the comments. But that's all right. I'm only watching the comments. I'm not watching me, so that's the important part. So we'll give it a minute for everybody to get on board, then we'll get underway. Morning, Thomas. Morning, Anne. Morning, Marie. Morning, Ian. Morning, Ewan. Morning, Sarah. To say we're up over the 100 mark, but we'll give it a wee minute for people to get on board because I am a little early. I don't want to kick the show off until 11:15, so I'll just waffle a bit now while so we don't have too much in the way of dead air. Morning, Austin. Morning, Carol. Morning, Arthur. Bob. Billy. Hamish. Caroline. Numbers are climbing nicely this morning. Morning, Nancy. Morning, Karen. So, got a lot to get through today. 30 minutes to do it in. So, about 40 seconds we'll get underway. Wee Bob's in for another take from Davy. You're welcome, Bob. Morning, Robert. Morning, Stephen. John. Steve. David. Struthers. Ronnie. Avril. Alison. Okay, there's more than 100s on board, and that's 11:15, so let's get this broadcast underway. It's Indytruck Davy out the truck and at home in his office in Salisbury, North Lanarkshire, where it is pretty clear at the moment, but rain's coming, and it's 13 degrees. That's your weather forecast for Salisbury, North Lanarkshire. You want to know what the weather's like? Look at your rain, bloody windy. Alright, so Wednesday started with one theme in the rise. The First Minister's Indy 2 announcement. The First Minister has published the Indy 2 bill and has asked the Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain to refer it to the Supreme Court to test whether or not it's within the competence of the Scottish Parliament. Okay, now the court has agreed to look at the case, or to look at the bill, and all the commenters believe the bill is out with the competence of the Scottish Parliament. A ruling on the case is expected in November or December of 2022. I personally believe we'll get to the judgment a lot quicker than that. Now, the right-wing Boney Rags, the Fail and the Express, they go into meltdown. They all scream Sturgeon's mad and wanting to hold a referendum when everything has gone to hell in a handbag. Now, the union's starting point this time round is you can't leave now. We've wrecked the economy and we're stripping you of your human rights. We've condemned your children to poverty. Stay so we can continue to steal your resources and stay together so that we can all suffer together. Alright, the unions seem to think, like Labour in Glasgow, that all they have to do is snap their fingers and they win. But 70 years of Labour's mismanagement in Glasgow is nothing compared to 300 years of mismanagement from Westminster. Okay, now, the idea that because we've been in an abusive relationship for 300 years, that we should stay any longer. Well, last time round it was stay, we love you, we'll change, we'll let you lead the way. This time round it's a case of, we're not letting you leave. You're a prisoner, you're a captive. It's went to being abusive to super abusive as the relationship between Scotland and the Union. So there you go. We are now prisoners and Scotland has been reduced to a colony apparently. Right, moving on. Wednesday morning here in Scotland, the broadcast media are in meltdown. With John Swinney on the radio, with the First Minister on the radio and TV, and we also read Ross on them both. Alright. John Swinney is asked about Plan C, they are calling it. A plebiscite election. John says majority MPs in the election would declare. The First Minister says majority of votes in the plebiscite election and would declare. Reid Ross says he and his Tories are no playing toys out the pram. The BBC once again try to set the rules of the game for Indy 2 by saying a majority of the vote must be over 50% of the voters. But that's not what the First Minister said. First Minister said is if the SNP win the majority of the vote. Didn't say over 50% of the vote. She said majority of the vote. Right. So what is interesting about that? In the last Scottish election, the SNP got 47% of the vote. And the Scottish Greens, who also ran on a manifesto pledge for independence, took 8% of the vote. So in the last Scottish election, the SNP and the Greens took 55% of the vote. If that's not a mandate to hold a referendum and to ask yourself a question, then what the hell bloody is? Because that's over half the voters that took part. Right, moving on. Wednesday, here in Scotland, Police Scotland to remove goodwill and pay dispute with the Scottish Government. Officers will now claim overtime for doing extra duties, or if their shifts are moved about, or if they're asked to work out a different police station or jurisdiction. Alright, so trouble ahead as Police Scotland go on a work to rule. Right, moving on. Wednesday, the Scottish Government gives 65 million to the war efforts in Ukraine. Bojo the Clown will give $1 billion in arms and aid. This is part of a larger package put together by NATO members at the NATO meeting in Madrid. Also Wednesday, Sweden and Finland are admitted into the NATO alliance. And out of that meeting on Wednesday in Madrid, it's announced that Joe Biden will be sending American troops across to Europe, and 2 Air Force units will be moving to the UK. Now, the idea is to beef up Europe's eastern border. Now, if that's not a red rag to a bull, when Bojo was talking about toxic masculinity, then there could be trouble ahead, because it's just going to incite Putin and put the Russians in fear for their safety. Right, also Wednesday, an English political commentator points out the hypocrisy in Westminster's Indytruck 2 stance. Marina Puchis tells the Vine Show that it's absolute hypocrisy, and that Westminster supposedly all about sovereignty and want to leave the European Union, but has absolute aversion to Scotland wanting to do the same thing, leave a union. And she points out that it is a bloody union. And then she goes on to talk about how the Scots have been lied to since 2014, and how we've been ripped out of Europe against our will. Then Pukis turns around and says, and you know, if I was a Scot, I wouldn't want anything to do with the Westminster cabal. She never said criminal cabal, but she was close. She wouldn't want anything to do with the Westminster cabal, and if I was a Scot, I'd be out of here. So English political commentator points out that the journalists and the news media are talking pish and are absolutely hypocrites. All right. Moving on, Wednesday lunchtime rolls around and PMQs is on. Bojo the Clown is out of the Union in Spain, so Deputy First Minister Dominic, the destroyer of human rights, Raab, is up to face Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner. Now, I'm not sure what was going on. It was a bit of pantomime. Rayner led on the cost of living crisis. Raab accused Labour of supporting the rail strikes. Rayner accused Raab and the criminal cabal of dereliction of duty over the rail strikes for not getting round the table to negotiate. And Raab winks at Rayner and called her a champagne socialist, who, rather than being on the picket line, was at the bally. Rayner countered the opera she attended, can't even remember what she said it was called, was about a woman up against a full male villain. It sort of went to pot after that. I have no Scooby what point Rayner was trying to make, or what point Raab was trying to make. What I do know is that Rayner's questions weren't answered by Raab, and Raab's, it wasn't a question time. It was like a chat across the box, big smiles and winks and laughs. 2 cheeks of the same arse, all the bloody same. Anyway, after that, next up was Blackford, and he asked Raab why they think they can block Scottish democracy. Raab said now is not the time. Blackford said no PM would block Scottish democracy. Raab read out a bit of a list of supposed Scottish shortfalls, and then people of Scotland want is for Scotland's two governments to work together to solve these problems, and that the Tories were enthusiastic to work with the Scottish Government. All they've done is strip the Scottish Parliament of power. That's all they've done. They're not interested in working with the Scottish Parliament. They're not even interested in talking to the Scottish Parliament. What they are interested in doing is stealing our bloody resources and being abusive now that we've filed for divorce. And what sort of behaviour did we expect? After all, we've seen them with the EU and the intransigence with the EU. So, you know, it's absolute, it's just a hypocrisy. You know, we're now prisoners to these bampots, and abuse is a relationship right enough. Hey, divorce papers have been served. They're in the courts. Let's see how they react. They react with mere abuse and belittling. And hey, Dominic Raab started off by saying to Ian Blackford, it's good to see you're in your place. And it was meant, you second-class citizen, sit there and shut the fuck up. It was absolutely disgusting. Right. So, a lot of bollocks. And hey, the Scotland's two governments work together. Then Deirdre Brock asked a question about, she reads out a list of all the assets that Scotland holds within the UK and says, is that why the UK won't let Scotland go? And at this point, Rab says to Deirdre Brock, pooling and sharing. What he meant was they're fucking stealing and we're all going hungry. Kids are going to bed hungry. Granny's riding the fucking bus. Keep warm. And this plonker, pooling and sharing better together. Stealing, for Christ's sake. Moving on, Wednesday afternoon, and the presiding officer of the Scottish Parliament and the First Minister meet with the Duchess of Balmoral at Holyrood Palace. The discussions were private, but you can bet your boots Indy Rev 2 was on the cards. Anyway, after the meeting, the First Minister says the Duchess of Balmoral will continue to be head of state after Indy. Davy says aye, until we get round to a referendum to remove them. The matter won't be that prominent initially, as we'll have other things to do, like set up a currency, set up a bank, set up borders, sort out infrastructure, get the budget sorted out. But somewhere down the line, the next 10, 15 years after independence, you can bet your boots there'll be a referendum, because Scotland will be a bloody republic. If Davy's got anything to say about it. And one thing's for sure, you don't know Davy, he's not going to shut his trap, so Davy will have something to say about it. Right, moving on, Wednesday, an EU negotiator, Mario Stefanic, says the NI protocol bill that breaks international law is a gun on the table in the negotiations with the EU. Mr. Stefanovic tells an event in London the EU will not negotiate with the bill on the table. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, the idiot, says the bill will fix the Northern Ireland border problem by moving it from the Irish Sea to the island of Ireland. Why will that happen? Well, the EU will defend their trade border, so a hard border on the island of Ireland is a possibility. Anywho, trade war's coming. Things are about to get real bad. And when the Americans wade into it, things could get really difficult. No wonder little England is desperate to hold on to Scotland and its resources, because remember, Chancellor Rishi Sunak has told us all that the cost of living crisis and the emergency the UK faces will be paid for by Scottish resources. He admitted it on telly. Now you've got rabid bit in the comments that they're stealing our resources to keep the bankrupt piece of shit country afloat. Wow. Moving on, Wednesday, and Bojo might have his out when it comes to Brexit. President Macron has suggested a new political club in Europe in light of the Ukraine conflict. The new club would give democratic nations a space for political allegiances, defence and security allegiances, or cooperation, and it would let them work together on things like energy security and free movement of people. Now, the UK is not a democracy, and the English wanted out the EU because of free movement of people, so I don't suppose England will be joining. But even if this new club is set up, I don't think Bojo's UK would be welcome. Maybe after Bojo's gone, they might be welcome. But I don't think Bojo's UK would be welcome. So that's just a matter of how it is. You know. So that was and also Wednesday, a new report for the Speaker of the House of Commons is released. Now, he asked for a review into Port Commons procedures and things like that. Anyway, the outcome of it is, down there in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers, children will not be welcome, or babies will not be welcome in the Commons chamber. But what I have to say about that is, you know, normally I would say that this is a backward step, but because of the environment and the cesspit down there in the House of Thieves and Carpetbaggers, it might be just as well that children don't go into that horrible environment. Okay, so that's what I have picked out to talk about for yesterday. The spark with the EU is being escalated. The EU see the NI protocol bill as a gun being held to their head and they're not playing. Biden's going to beef up the security on the eastern flank of Europe by sending military presence there, which is only going to further rattle Putin's cage. The economy is still in shite state. The unionists think we should remain in the union because they've wrecked the union and they need the resources to fix their bloody mistakes. And and the pound fell off a gig yesterday and all. Bang. So, an absolute feckin' disaster, and we're being held hostage by an abusive partner. That's the news and a roundup for you. I wonder what the papers have got to say this morning. By the way, I hope you found the information informative, and I hope you found the delivery entertaining. So let's move on to this morning and see what the bloody rags have to say this morning. Scotland's paper, confusion over IndyRef 2 and police work to rule. Confusion over SNP's IndyRef election. There's no confusion about it. The SNP will sweep the board. They'll get the majority of the vote because I don't suppose the Greens will stand and hopefully the Alpha Party will stay out the bloody road. And that way 55% of the vote share in the next UK general election will go to the SNP if they knock back a referendum. If they knock back a referendum and try to deny Scotland's inalienable human right to self-determination, I expect the United Nations will put their neck above the parapet and have something to say about it. So there is no confusion about it. Right, majority do not want referendum next year. Apparently 53% don't and 40% do. Yeah, listen, democracy must be served. If a referendum's gone ahead, next year's as good as any. We're sitting 54% in the poll at the moment for yes. That's only going to get better, going to get higher as we get further into this year, especially when the next whack of energy costs hits in October. Right, the National has. There is no case for the union, and that was Blackford to Rab. Blackford asked them to give him the state case for the union. Rab just basically said, better, like, you know, like the pishers. The Metro has. Police stage a cop out. No bad. That's on Police Scotland. The Courier, let's have a look at what the Courier's going to say. Golf's open to be hit by police pay protest. Ah, well, toughy. And the Times has troops surge to defend NATO's east from Putin. And that's what we're talking about with Biden going to beef up the east flank of NATO with US troops. Right, the only rag the Daily Fail has. Charles would never take suitcase of cash again. Shouldn't have taken it in the first place. If he hadn't get caught, he'd have stuffed it in his bank account, no doubt. The other loony right-wing rag, the Scottish Daily Fail has. Meghan bullying inquiry buried. Findings of Palace probe into claims Duchess drove out two traumatised assistants will never be made public. There you go, one rule for them and another one for us. That would have been a tribunal, an employment tribunal if it had been anywhere else. The Herald has NHS board's multi-million-pound bill for botched childbirths. Greater Glasgow and Clyde say 80% of 280 million claims linked to deliveries. There you go. And the Daily Record has exclusive hell on earth. Huge pressures on doctors. 749 hospital workers off, with nurses and staff absences spike. COVID in Greater Glasgow alone. COVID's on its way up, folks. which means it's very difficult for the NHS to recover. The Daily Telegraph has number 10 fears PM faces kangaroo court. What's that all about? Number 10 is concerned the Prime Minister faces a kangaroo court over the investigations into whether he misled Parliament about parties in Downing Street, the Daily Telegraph says. The paper reports that Boris Johnson's allies have accused the House of Commons Privilege Committee of relying on hearsay evidence by allowing people to give evidence anonymously, setting up the prospect the PM will refuse to resign if he is found to have Bojo's not going anywhere. He said last week he intends to be in power to 2030 at least, and he's gerrymandering the vote to make sure he is there. And it's a matter of whether the sycophants can keep him in place. Right, let's see what the stars got for us today as we get moving on. The star has mystery as rocket crashes into the moon. You can't park that there, pal. The Daily Star says that NASA scientists have been left baffled by craters that have appeared on the moon under the headlines, "You can't park that there, mate." The paper's extraterrestrial affairs correspondent Michael Moran reports that the mysterious impact craters were left after rockets crash landed there. There you go. So there you go. Apparently somebody's been firing rockets at the moon. It's a bit like the Daily Star. I think most of them are rockets for the moon. It's a brilliant rag. Right, folks. Hey, that's what I've got for you today. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it informative. Right, one of the usual stuff. I mean, we're going to hear an awful lot of piss over the next wee while about no, you can't, now's not the time, and things are that shite, you can't afford to leave. So that's the easiest. I mean, apart from being abusive in the relationship, they're trapping us in the relationship as well. Well, so they think. The all of the Scottish people will out, democracy will win through. Okay, so partisan politics in your pockets, keep your eyes on the prize, then you how you gonies, get out there and win hearts and minds. The more hearts and minds we win, the more pressure we put on. Okay, and support independent media. Support Broadcasting Scotland, support Independent Live, support Caledon Media, support Cruise Radio, support independent vloggers and bloggers, support the national newspaper. And if any of these things have got a crowdfunder going and you've got a few shekels to spare, throw your pennies in the pot. All right. They do great work, these independent bloggers and bloggers. Now, David and I will be going live on our YouTube channel, The Two Davies, at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And we will chat with you, the audience, on Nicola Sturgeon's announcement. I think that's what we'll do the programme on the day. We'll put the PowerPoint that we had meant for today to one side, and we'll chat with you guys on Nicola Sturgeon's announcement and the way forward on that. Okay, right, health messaging, you just heard me. Health boards are starting to get into trouble again as rising figures for COVID go up. Dumfries and Galloway have shut their hospitals to everything but emergency admittances and no visitors. It's that bad down there in the borders at the moment. So, face coverings, that's the guidance. If you're in a large and closed public space, face coverings. All right. Clean hands and surfaces regularly. If you've got the sniffles, mask up and social distance. And if you're still testing, please send the tests into NHS Scotland so that we can properly monitor as best as we can how much of this is in the community. Okay, now you guys look after each other, and I'll be back tomorrow to do it all again. But remember, we'll put the links out in my Facebook page, we'll put the link out in David's Facebook page, and we'll put a link out through our groups for the Two Davy show this afternoon on YouTube. Okay, so we'll catch you all this afternoon about at 4 o'clock on YouTube. Now look after yourselves, and we'll be back to do it all again tomorrow morning. First Minister's questions a day. You just know what's going to be about her announcement or in the F2. We Drossy will be standing up saying, "I'm not playing in your pretend referendum." You guys have a nice day. Look after yourselves.